Rikers Island stands in the East River, close enough to see Manhattan, distant enough to feel removed from it. It functions as a jail complex, not a prison. The people held here are largely pretrial detainees. Many have not been convicted. Some will never be. Within this system, punitive segregation operates as an internal control tool. It is designed to manage behavior inside an overcrowded and volatile environment. If stories like this matter to you, consider subscribing, because what happens next reveals how this system truly works. Punitive segregation at Rikers is not the same as long-term solitary confinement in state or federal prisons. It is shorter in theory, harsher in practice. It is imposed quickly, often for minor rule violations. It is used in a jail setting defined by noise, movement, and constant tension. When someone is placed in segregation, that chaos disappears. What replaces it is isolation, restriction, and uncertainty. The contrast itself becomes part of the punishment. The stated purpose of punitive segregation is discipline. It is meant to correct behavior and maintain order. Officers write a report. A supervisor approves removal from general population. The detainee is escorted to a segregation unit. This can happen within hours. The infractions triggering segregation are often low-level. Disobeying an order. Talking back. Possessing excess property. Refusing to move quickly enough during a count. None of these involve a new criminal charge. At intake, the process is procedural and fast. Personal property is removed. Clothing is exchanged for standard issue. Movement is tightly controlled. The detainee is assigned to a cell, usually alone. Doors are solid metal with narrow windows. The cell contains a bed, a toilet, and a sink. Light is artificial. Sound is muted. The transition from crowded housing to isolation is abrupt. Official rules place limits on time in punitive segregation. Periods range from a few days to several weeks depending on the charge and prior history. In practice, these limits often stretch. Hearings are delayed. Paperwork is incomplete. Staffing shortages slow reviews. Days blur into each other. Detainees may not know when release back to general population will occur. The lack of clear timelines becomes another source of stress. Daily life in segregation follows a rigid schedule. Movement is minimal. Meals are delivered through slots in the door. Recreation, if offered, occurs alone in a caged area for limited periods. Access to phones is restricted. Visits are limited or canceled. Medical and mental health checks are brief and often conducted through the door. Human contact is reduced to commands and compliance. Unlike sentenced prisoners, many in these units are awaiting trial. They have not been found guilty. The use of punitive segregation does not require a criminal conviction. It relies on administrative authority within the jail. This creates a system where punishment precedes adjudication. The legal presumption of innocence does not prevent isolation from being imposed. The environment inside Rikers amplifies the effects of segregation. The jail is chronically understaffed. Officers manage too many detainees at once. Tension is constant. Violence is frequent. Segregation becomes a management shortcut. Removing a detainee reduces immediate risk on the housing floor. It also removes a problem from view. Over time, reliance on this tool increases. Mental health consequences are well documented. Short-term isolation can trigger anxiety, depression, and disorientation. For those with existing mental illness, symptoms often worsen. Rikers holds a high number of detainees with mental health needs. Punitive segregation units are not therapeutic spaces. Treatment access is limited. The setting is not designed for stabilization. Reports describe detainees engaging in self-harm while in segregation. Suicidal ideation increases. Monitoring is inconsistent. Cells designed for control become places of crisis. Lawsuits later cite failures to intervene in time. The connection between isolation and mental deterioration becomes central to legal challenges against the city. Oversight bodies repeatedly flagged the use of punitive segregation at Rikers. Investigations note excessive placements for minor infractions. They document extended stays beyond prescribed limits. They find poor record-keeping and inadequate review processes. Recommendations call for reduced use, especially for vulnerable populations. Implementation lags behind policy. The line between punitive segregation and administrative segregation often blurs. Administrative segregation is intended for safety or investigation. Punitive segregation is disciplinary. In practice, the conditions are similar. Isolation is the constant. The distinction offers little relief to the person inside the cell. Violence inside Rikers feeds the cycle. Detainees placed in segregation may return to general population more volatile than before. Isolation does not address underlying conflicts. It pauses them. When the door opens, unresolved tensions remain. This contributes to further incidents and further placements. Correction officers also operate under strain. Staffing shortages force overtime. Fatigue affects judgment. Segregation becomes a default response rather than a last resort. Training on de-escalation is inconsistent. The system rewards containment over resolution. Legal scrutiny intensifies over time. Civil rights lawsuits argue that punitive segregation violates constitutional protections, especially for pretrial detainees. Courts examine whether isolation constitutes punishment without due process. Settlements and consent decrees follow. Federal monitors are appointed. Findings describe systemic failure. Public attention grows as stories emerge. Advocacy groups release reports. Media investigations detail conditions. Video footage shows officers struggling to maintain control. The image of Rikers shifts from a troubled jail to a symbol of dysfunction. Punitive segregation units become a focal point in that narrative. Policy changes are announced. Limits are tightened. Certain populations are excluded from segregation on paper. Implementation remains uneven. Cultural change inside the jail moves slowly. The physical infrastructure remains the same. Cells built for control continue to exist. As violence and lawsuits mount, the broader collapse of Rikers accelerates. City leaders debate closure. New facilities are proposed. The legacy of punitive segregation becomes part of the argument. It represents a system that relies on isolation to manage problems it cannot solve. For detainees who experience it, segregation leaves lasting effects. Even short stays alter behavior and perception. Trust in the system erodes. The experience reinforces a sense of powerlessness. For those later released without conviction, the punishment has already occurred. Rikers punitive segregation units reveal how control operates inside a jail. They show how administrative power can impose punishment without a verdict. They expose the gap between policy and practice. They illustrate how understaffing and disorder shape decision-making. This is not a story of hidden chambers or extreme sentences. It is a story of routine decisions made every day. It is about minor infractions leading to major consequences. It is about isolation used as management in a place designed to hold people temporarily. As the city moves toward dismantling Rikers, these units stand as evidence. They show what happens when a jail becomes overwhelmed. They show how control replaces care. They show how punishment expands beyond its intended bounds. The collapse of Rikers is not sudden. It is the result of years of accumulated failure. Punitive segregation is one part of that history. It reflects priorities. It reflects constraints. It reflects a system struggling to function. What remains is a record. Reports. Lawsuits. Testimony. And the experiences of thousands who passed through these cells while awaiting judgment. The story is documented. The consequences are measurable. The questions about accountability remain. If you think this story was intense, the next one will leave you speechless. Subscribe for more true crime stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat.